There's a way to get more bicep in the video. Hey everybody, welcome back. Tom Moto-Resto LLC, Braden, Florida. We are going to be doing video number 6 on the Z1-R, which is focusing specifically on the swing arm modifications. In this video, what I'm going to cover is installing the needle bearings into the swing arm, the Suzuki needle bearings. And we're going to go over how we're going to lay out the actual bearing bushings and get this thing mocked up, at least partially mocked up as far as alignment goes inside the frame. I'm also going to go over a couple of plans I have to modify it as far as to seal it off, because right now we don't have any seals or anything like that that are designed into this that we can use. But I have an idea, so let's go ahead and get right to it. Let's go ahead and go over parts. Of course, we have a swing arm. I have the old needle bearings, as you know, driven out because I think that was in the last video. These are brand new Suzuki OEM needle bearings for this. I got them on Fleabay. Seller was most excellent in getting them to me quickly. Again, OEM, and these are also OEM new old stock. These are the bushings that would go inside the bearings like this. And then the pivot, or if you want to call it an axle, goes inside that. And then you have these, I don't know what Suzuki calls them. I think Suzuki calls them a bushing or something like that. They get pressed into the ends here of the actual swing arm, not the actual swing arm, the swing arm. And when you press those in, there's a certain amount of, there's clearance designed into this. So essentially this is going to go through like this and be about maybe a little bit extending outside the edge of these two bushings, or whatever you want to call them. I think I'm just going to call them bushings that go on each end here. Now I only had 3 because one was missing out of this thing. Somebody had driven one out. And so I got this 4th one. Came out of the UK. And again, Suzuki new old stock. What else are you going to use, right? And so the point here is we get our needle bearings pressed in. We can just slip these in and then press these guys on and squeeze them in, and then essentially have an assembly on each side of this, the head or the front of the swing arm. I got a couple of challenges though that I wanted to show you, and what my plans are for hopefully solving these, because I think I can make it better. $6 million man. We have the technology. We can make this swing arm better. I think we can. So let's go over that real quick. All right, how these go in, essentially, you can't see. Gee willikers, will you guys please? You know what? I'm going to have to move you. Hang on. All right, so let's go over parts. What we have here is a mess. We have 2 brand new needle bearings, Suzuki new old stock, courtesy of eBay from an excellent seller that shipped them very promptly. We have 2 bushings, the inner bushings that actually go inside, not actually, but really go inside the needle bearings. And then these bushings, translate that over to the actual swing arm pivot. This is the Kawasaki swing arm pivot, so got real lucky that these things fit right. I wasn't sure about that till I got them. These are harder than a coffin nail, so trying to bore these out with the rig that I got would be probably next to impossible. But these definitely fit, so we've got no problem with that. Again, this is the only Kawasaki part we're going to be using in this situation. These are all Suzuki. So then I have these, Suzuki I think calls them bushings as well. They go on the ends, they kind of cap off each one of these swing arm ends, these bosses. And then, you have your, you can't see, and then you have your bushings that go inside there, and of course your needle bearings are pressed in. Now the way these needle bearings were pressed in, they favored the outside this way. So you have this flat face that goes toward the outside. Let me get you up a little bit more. And because these things favor that outside, when these things are in place, this kind of goes toward the inside. And if it's centered like this or even pushed in, I think it'll be a little bit off. So I think I'm just going to probably push them in right to the center. It's not going to matter too much in this situation, except for, it just seems like the right thing to do. The main reason I think they do that is to give a little bit of a grease space, because if you have it over to one side versus the other, you have a little bit more space for grease, but we're going to have that anyway. It's not like this thing gets pinch between, you know, these bushings, it doesn't happen. So I think I'm going to push these in so they're about halfway in on each one, and then when this goes in, what happens is these bushings do this, all right, and they kind of sit like this, all right, and I measured this up, and it measures up where the bushing itself is going to be poking out both sides just a little bit. Now, that's not going to be a problem because this can go back and forth. In other words, if this bushing relative to these caps, if you want to call them that, needs to go in, that's fine. It doesn't matter. It depends on how it fits against the frame, because I think we're going to use some sort of a thrust washer, maybe, if there's space in there. I don't know. If not, it's going to butt right up against the surface of the frame where the other swing arm did, and we'll just leave it at that. So I'm not really sure how that's going to work. The other problem I have is I'm not sure what's going to capture it from going this way, because naturally on the outside of this thing, the frame is going to stop it. You know, let's say this is the frame. The frame is going to stop this from going out. There's nothing that keeps this bushing from going in this application. I imagine on the Suzuki, you know, the bike itself, there's some sort of a frame feature like a boss or something this thing sits over, you know, big piece. Maybe it's part of the monoshock assembly. I don't know. But that's what keeps that, I'm certain, to keep going inside, you know, to actually slide up the shaft and come off of your needle bearing. I'm not exactly sure how I'm going to solve that yet, but I think when I do one thing, it'll lead to the next. So let me do that first. The problem I have with doing it just like this, putting the needle bearing in, sliding this in, capping it off with these guys, which do slip through as I showed you before, is that there's no way to seal this off. Now, I talked to the customer about that, and he says, oh, don't worry about it. I'm never going to ride this thing in the rain or anything. You know me, he said, I just ride it around one place to the next and put it away. Okay, well, that may be the case, but I like to do a little bit better than that. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to machine some O-ring grooves in these guys here. There's plenty of meat to do it. I'm not sure what size O-ring. These are 25 millimeter OD as far as this sleeve goes. So I'll probably just get a bunch of different O-rings around that size and thickness, and then do some experimentation when I get to that point. And I'll grind up a high-speed steel bit for my boring bar, basically a grooving tool, and we'll put it in the lathe and just groove out a O-ring groove. That way when we put these in, this will seat in an O-ring on both ends. I'll do all 4 of them, and then we solved really that sealing problem. At least, you know, it's not perfect, but it'll be better than nothing. Now, as far as, I think that'll kind of bring us to the point where we can maybe solve this sliding problem too. The O-rings themselves are not going to prevent that from happening. I mean, they might, but I don't know. So what I'm going to end up doing at that point, since this is going to be sealed off on the inside with an O-ring, you know, like on this collar here, which you know, I was concerned about, I'm just going to machine like a piece of aluminum tubing that fits exactly between whatever this distance is, and then I will make that the ID of the tubing, that is the OD of the pivot, or as close to it as possible, and it's just going to bump up against there. I was thinking of making some way to utilize that as the seal. In other words, put something at the end of that tube that's like maybe rubber caps or something, but you know, I'm like, that ain't going to work. But then when I come up with the O-ring idea, it pretty much solved that, because now I can just put a tube in there. So it'll be captured on the ends by the frame, and then between the actual bosses here with a aluminum tubing, which will look good too, and then we don't have to worry about things walking. So we'll essentially make the aluminum piece about this size. So here's one of the caps, of course, and pretend this is on the end, and this is where the pivot goes through, of course. We will make one that is not bigger than the actual sleeve itself, because I think this sticks out a little bit when it's in there. But if it doesn't stick out, we have a little bit more latitude in the OD. Either way, we're just going to make it to capture, for sure, the face of the bushing between the 2 of them, the sleeve rather. And then I think that'll be fine. But before we do any of that, we need to get everything put together mock it up in the frame and see how things fall, because we got to make sure that this thing's going to fit this way, you know, overall width. And then we got to make sure that when we put it in there, regardless of what's going on in the center, that our offsets look pretty good, because there's a possibility that if we have an offset problem, may need to machine one of these, face it, to move it over, or add a, you know, some sort of thrust to it and face the other one to move it the other way to get this thing to sit where we want it to. I just don't know that yet. We're going to crawl before we walk. Let's go ahead and get these bearings pushed in first. Take it from there. Oh, really quick, I forgot to mention, yes, I did grind off the brackets from the bottom that were on there before. Cut them off and ground them off. And we're going to do these as well. Get these out of here. I don't need to do that right now, because even after the bearings are pressed, then I can just tape this up with some, you know, some tape, regular blue tape or painter's tape, and seal this up real good, and then do my grinding, and I'm not going to have to worry about the bearings. So I'm not going to worry about it right now, because it really is kind of a lengthy job to get this much material ground down, and makes a big mess over in my grinding area over on the bench. So I'm going to just do that at a later time. We're going to whack these off too. Whack them off. And then we'll take, you know, we'll have the swing arm ready for whatever kind of coating he wants to do on that at a later time. I'm sure I'll be able to convince him to do some paint instead of this ridiculous powder coating, but that's just me. So anyway, just wanted to mention that. I got a ball joint service tool set up here. I'm going to use that to press these in with, because it's just, this is so awkward trying to set it up in the actual vertical press. If I had an arbor press, it might be a little bit better, but anyway, I'm going to have to adjust this around a little bit, because this doesn't swivel, but I've already started it and it seems to be going in pretty good. So let's just use this and see what happens. Once we get it flush, I do have a tool that I made, an adapter. We can push that down below the surface, but see how it goes actually. Okay, these are tighter than, oof. I mean, when I press, okay, thanks a lot. These are really tight, so they got to go in straight. It looks pretty good so far. It's one of these things that is just, is really tight. You know, I got a really good idea. Now that I actually have it started, what I'll do is I'll start, well, I'm not going to do both sides. I think I will take it over to the press after all and finish it up, at least get it flush, because this gets us started. We know we're in straight. I mean, if we weren't in straight, it wouldn't have gone in this far. So now what I'll do is I'll go over and I'll bring this in. Then we'll use this, or I think, to push that down to halfway in, because it's a little bit more controllable. So let me just go do that. I'll come right back here. Nope, a little more. That should be it. I lied. Alright, so that worked out pretty well. This is the tool I made, but unfortunately, it's, for once in my life, my tool is too long. Mic drop. So yeah, there's an extension I made for it as well, because I needed to press it out by reaching down from one to the other, I think it was. I can't remember a reason why I made it that way, but at any rate, it's too long and too unsteady to do this, so I just turned down a old bearing, as you saw, the outside of it, so it just fits in there nice. Push them down to about halfway, which, according to my calculations, about 350 bananas, 0.350, which that was a little lower than that, but actually it's a little more proud than that. It's okay. It's close enough. Long as they're about in the center, which they are, and so this one maybe, yeah, doesn't matter. We're good, because these things are going to be just fine. Normally, they, as I said before, they ride more toward the outside the way I found them. So now we got that. We've got this. So, yeah, we're going to go ahead and just lightly grease these up for mock-up purposes. We're obviously going to have to knock out the these again later on, which is fine, because, you know, just take these out and you can reach in and drive these out from the inside with a drift, you know, from opposite sides. Not a big deal. That's probably how this one got damaged, this bearing. This is one of the originals. This is the side that one of these was missing on, so somebody went to drive it out and caught the edge of the bearing instead, and the next thing you know, it's damaged, and we don't have one of the, you know, outside thrust bushings. But corrected that. So, all right, let's go take a break. I'm gonna get a snack, come back, and we'll put a little grease in here, a little bit more than there already is, and squeeze these guys on, and then we'll give her just a look-see on the frame and see how it lines up. Slather some in here. Kendall Super Blue. Tappy tap tap. So that actually lines up more flush than I thought it would. Just a little bit. That's okay. Okay, folks. Unfortunately, this is absolutely not going to work. Here's the reason. This feature of the frame, that's where the rear brake lever, this is the boss for that rear brake lever, it sticks out inside the frame area, and there's no way this is going to fit, because when it's down in its normal position approximately, it hits right here. There's no clearance for this. Even when it's thrusted over to the left here, it's just not going to fit. Now, I thought it would, because when I originally eyed it out, you know, I didn't have any bushings, didn't have any way to get a really accurate center line. I thought it was going to clear, and so I call a customer. He says he's going to call me back. Tell him the bad news. We're not going to be able to use the swing arm. There's no way. We'd have to cut this off, and then you'd have no rear brake. We're not going to do that, especially to a D1 frame. There's no way. I'd say, ha, forget it. That's where we're at. So yeah, one of these things when you're customizing, it happens. I'm not worried about it. It was fun doing it, and not a big deal. Now, unfortunately, I butchered this swing arm already, so we can't even put it back on eBay and sell it, you know, as a 1150E or 1150R, whatever it is, swing arm, because it's modified. So, hey, it is what it is. We'll see what he wants to do. You know, we're just going to have to use the original swing arm unless he comes up with something else. He doesn't like the proximity of the rear wheel. Seems to be crunched in. He wants it extended. You know, what he really needs to do is just get another swing arm from this, or a KZ1000 if it would fit, and then have it extended, or buy an extended swing arm from one of the aftermarketers. I'm sure there's somebody out there that makes one, and then do it that way, because it's just not going to work. Hey, it is what it is. So I'll let you know what he says. Alright, what you just saw is a proof of concept. You know, there's an old saying out there that goes, if Alan Milliard can do it, we can do it too. And if you don't know who Alan Milliard is, look up his videos and you'll know what I mean. So, got it to clear with it right pretty much on that 2x4, which is about where, I haven't measured this out yet, but you know, perhaps where a shock is going to go. I can hog that out more. In fact, I'm going to, but I'll get into that in a minute. Let's see if some of our numbers line up. Now, the ID of this aluminum one between the inside, you know, parts of the swing arm is the same 9 inches as the original one. So that works out. So that means the center line is 4.5, which I've already marked. So let's go ahead and check this offset from the outside edge of that reference with a straight edge to the center is 6 7/8. So let's see if that's the same on this one. Nothing says that it's going to be because of the thrust. We have a little play there, but you know, it's always good to play with your thrust. So I heard. This is 6.5 to the center, so we do have a variance here. That's Well, I wanted to check this. So, you know, that's 3/8 of an inch difference. That's, you know, pretty significant. So if we pushed it all the way over to this side, let's see what we get then. And we're at 6 and just over, I'd say, where are we? Just under 3/4. So let's say a little over 1/8 off still with it pushed all the way over. We probably could live with that. You know, it really all depends on another part of it here is where these guys are going to fall, if they fall straight down onto it or not. That looks pretty good there. The whole point is we got to get this thing dialed into a number of axes. Okay, yeah. So this is not stretched out or anything, you know, left or right on the rubber. And they're lining up pretty much along the edge, so that'll be actually pretty easy to weld on some tabs. Now this is not necessarily in the exact spot because I don't really have the height yet, and I need to move some more material there. You see, it will go down a little further, but then it hits that spot over here that I've been grinding or cutting the aluminum out to accommodate. We can do those measurements another time. So the proof of concept, in my opinion, is that it would work with some modifications to that spot that I just cut out, which I'm going to show you my thought process on that here in a second. My thought process on this is essentially what we're looking at is the nominal opening size, the clearance size, okay? So let's say I open this up another 1/8 inch. I can't go too far this way more, but I probably can go up to the inside, so that'll give me about 1/8. So if I do 1/8 of an inch all around this and kind of just with a more of a sharper round, if you will, corner, all the way up and around, I think my welder can weld in essentially a piece that will rebox this in. So it'll essentially be boxed in like a recessed triangle area that will give us the clearance. I'm not too worried about strength here. This is pretty beefy, but I'd be concerned about, number one, aesthetics, and number two, you know, internal corrosion on this thing, not to seal this up. So plus the strength, you know, aspect of it. So even some 1/8 inch aluminum, you know, I can even cut that and make that for him, so it'll go essentially in. So picture a triangle going in on this plane, and then 2 straight pieces, 1 and 1, that would meet that, and he can just take that in. I think that this will work. So what I'm going to do is, I can't do it today, probably next week. I'm going to see if I'm going to contact him and see if I can go FaceTime with him and explain what I want. We can just drive this stuff out on this one side and tape this one up again, and then bring it over to him, and we'll see if he can do that. I'm sure I have some aluminum around here. I can make some plates out of, some pieces to fill it in with. I got to talk to him first, make sure that I don't have some foreign aluminum that would, you know, not want to take with this when he TIGs it. Sometimes the aluminum is important in regards to compatibility. So I don't know, he could probably give me an idea what this probably is. I don't know what it is. So yeah, that's the idea at least. The proof of concept definitely works. The numbers are close enough on the spread and the center line because I'm concerned about the offset of the rear wheel where it aligns to the engine. The engine we can't move, and the sprocket we can't move. We can move the rear wheel. If I'm only 1/8 or 3/16 off on an offset, and I need to thrust that over to one side, which I can easily do, machine some, you know, a thrust washer, bushing for it, whatever you want to call it, then what we'll do is we'll take and just likewise machine whatever we need on the wheel side to get that to line up once we get to that point, you know, and get this thing lined straight up from sprocket to sprocket. So yeah, I don't like to give up. I don't give up easily on these things. And I talked to the customer and he said, play with it, do what you got to do. We can always fall back to the original swing arm. So this is going to be the plan right now, and we'll see how it plays out. Well, that's about it on this one, folks. This custom stuff is definitely where it's at for me. It's my comfort and zen zone. I really love doing it, and so I'm kind of excited that the proof of concept here seems to be A+ positive, because with those numbers and with the relief cuts I made, and I think that my welder can you know, do a patch on that, special patch, and then close that up with still maintaining that clearance. That'll be really cool. The customer will be real happy. I don't like to give up, and I don't give up unless I have to. And so with all, like I said, with the way it all lays out, I think it's going to work just fine if he can do that. And if he can, we'll just have him do the shock mounts at the same time when I bring it out to him. we'll lay all that out off camera. I'm not going to bore you with all that stuff. So that's it. Like I said, if you liked what I almost knocked it over, huh? If you liked what you've seen in the video, please like the video. Consider subscribing to the channel. Definitely ring the bell. You know, all that stuff helps the analytics. It doesn't cost you a cent. So I'm going to go ahead and sign off and say thanks again for watching. And remember, folks, don't just repair, customize. We'll catch you on the next video.